Moment in my life, I am cherishing and yearning for experiences and moments. Those light little joys that make it so meaningful. I'm also trying to do it on a very tight budget. So when my mother suggested that there is a free powwow event in my area, I was beyond excited to go because I've never been to one before. And I know from watching them on the internet, it can be an immersion of spirit and culture, beauty and dance, and so many other experiences that I've never had before. Of course, I can't go to these things alone, so I took my roommate along with me. What I was not expecting was an incident that I first thought was a grave insult, but ended up being a momentary honor. Let me explain. At first, getting to the event required to cross a rickety old suspension bridge. I am terrified of bridges and unsteady things, as well as I have to be mindful of uneasy footing with roommates' age and vision issues. That bridge swung and swayed and shook with every step we took. I told him to hold on tight to the steel cables as I clutched onto them myself. I recorded myself in a video crossing this bridge. In the water, snakes and turtle heads actually popped up while we were crossing. There were spider webs lined on the steel cables with every touch, and in my mind, I was regretting it, since my fears that either him or myself would lose our footing and our stability. But you know something? We finally got across. It was a victory that my heart pounded with complete excitement. We come to the event, and I realize this wasn't necessarily meant to be an open event to the public. This was a tribal community camping event. Everyone was camping there for days. Families gathered, tribal members gathered. We got there a little early. They were scheduled to start at noon, and we arrived at around 10:30, so there was nothing really going on in the moment. We found ourselves a little spot across from the center stage near a big, huge tree and parked our chairs there. There were already long rows of chairs reserved, already in place for the events to come, so finding an open spot was actually amazing. Rumi is making conversation with everyone who passed us, and he was met with such respect. While he may not have been part of their tribe, he was an old veteran that served in Vietnam, and today happened to be a day of honoring veterans, tribal veterans. I was so nervous because in my heart I felt that somehow we might do something wrong or be offensive because I was not aware of the significance to their culture. The first incident that stood out in my mind was the initial drum circle. In the distance, I heard the beating of the drums. I wanted to go see it, but Rumi was so concerned that someone would steal our chairs. I told him, don't worry about it. Nobody's going to steal anything here, and they're certainly not going to take the chairs, particularly since there's hundreds of chairs already in place. But he insisted he had to be the remaining protector of the chairs. And I told him, okay, stay here. I'm just going to go take a look, and I will be right back. As I drew closer to the beating of the drums, I noticed that the area was cordoned off. There was a line around the perimeter, and I was just at the edge of that perimeter. The drums were just at the slight distance, but I stayed off the coordinates and smiled as the constant beating of the drums can be felt. One of the older elders, I don't know his exact status or anything, but he was just behind the head drummer, looked at me, and waved for me to come forward, gesturing at me. I went over to him slowly and cautiously, in which he just waved for me to come over faster. He was sitting down, but there was no place for me to sit. So instinctively, all I could think of was to kneel down next to him on the ground. And he started talking to me. I didn't know what the significance of that gesture might mean in their culture. But by me kneeling next to him, he smiled and started to tell me the story of the drums and what the significance of the beating of the drums meant and the story behind that they were telling of the drums. He was also telling me how this was a broadcast for the Indians for Indians live channel and that they were live right now as the drummings were going. I wish I remembered all he said, but with the immersion of everything that happened during the day, this was one of many stories that happened. But when the drums beats finally finished, I was so moved by it. I felt it in my heart. My eyes watered and I was so emotional. I thanked him so much and I had risen and went back to tell the roomie all about the drum circle. From there, I didn't realize that they started to set up another drum circle directly in front of us. I was wondering if we needed to move, so when I asked one of the elders, she just smiled to me and said, "Your seats are fine, enjoy." They set up the drums directly in front of us, literally but a chair distance away from one of the lead drummers. That is when, after some time, they begin to set up the opening ceremonies and the festivities begin. Oh, it was gorgeous. It was beautiful. The costumes, the beaded work, the feathers, the constant drumming and thumping of the beat. It was so moving and emotional to watch. As close as we were, it saddened me that my roommate was unable to see what was going on. He could not see the extravagant beadwork or the movements or the dancing. Maybe the elders overheard what we were talking about, but I started to describe to him what was going on visually. Like, for example, something I've never seen before was monetary offerings. Any power I've never seen, I never seen them throw money at the honored individual's feet. As they danced, each person that they were honoring, piles of money build up to a mound of cash, and attendants would scoop up these offerings, giving it to the honored individual. Many tribal members were honored that day, and many went away with stacks of cash. One thing that I noticed was that I had no idea of the significance, but each one had a ritualistic either shawl or costume, some sort of wrap, feathers, pins. They had embroidered messages on their shawls. Depending on who it was, each was different. But what stood out to me was their feathers, the eagle feathers. I told my roomie how amazing it was to see all these eagle feathers, how it's illegal for us to have these feathers, but feathers are a great significance to tribal members. Most people were adorned with maybe 1 or 2 feathers at most. I don't know what the cultural significance is in the amount of feathers, but the one tribal grandma, you can tell she was the oldest in the tribe, and she was being honored directly being behind the head drum circle guy. She had this gorgeous handheld piece of nothing but eagle feathers and beads. It was handheld, but massive in a fan-out shape, adorned with lots of pretty beads. The piece was gorgeous. I'm going to assume that the piece was very sacred. At one moment, unknowingly to this woman, that piece fell behind her into the dirt and mud. Instinctively, with a kind heart and giving nature, my roomie stood up, went over to pick up the piece. Now at this time, the woman was singing and chanting while they were doing the drum circle. But he went over, he picked up the piece, he touched the woman. And right there, I was like thinking to myself, holy shit, no, don't. But she looked at him. looked down at her feathers, accepted them back, and continued to chant her song. He sat down as if it was nothing. At the completion of her chant and the drum beat, she comes over to my roommate, and my expectation was that they were going to completely kick us out and ask us to leave. That is how fearful I was at that moment. But the complete opposite happened. Instead, she handed him a wad of cash. My mouth was flabbergasted. She just honored him as if he was a member of the tribe. I watched as he refused at first, and I said to him, "Don, don't refuse it." Instead, he clutched his hands with her and began to tell a story of how I'm assuming might have been the tribal princess or maybe her granddaughter, but how he was so moved by her decorated clothing and her long and gorgeous braids that he wanted to give honor to her. The elder woman smiled, hugged, gave a kiss, thanked him for his service as a veteran, nodded her head, and graciously stepped away. I am not too sure if his regifting his offering was an insult, but to me as a witness, this entire moment and that experience, he was actually being honored by the tribe. He was being given a monetary offering. He was being thanked by the tribe with gratitude. And it wasn't just anyone in the tribe. It was the oldest woman of the tribe. That to me was so moving and so touching to watch. In fact, for me, the whole day was a complete immersion of beauty and culture and familyness, togetherness. The tribal people all came over to me and our roommate. They shook our hands. In fact, I was surprised how almost everyone shook our hands. We were, for that day, part of that tribe. It was so beautiful, and even recounting this story fills me with emotion. And I have to take a moment and stop and think that it's moments like these I just need to stop and smell the roses and appreciate every giving, loving moment that life brings me, because life is way too short. And it's these moments that I can hold to my heart and hold to my head and smile and just live life.